What's going on, everybody? And welcome into the 105th episode of the Crazy One podcast. As always, I'm your host, Stephen Gates, and this is a show where we talk about creativity, leadership, design, and today, things like careers. As always, you can listen to the show, get the show notes, and a whole lot more. Just head over to thecrazy1.com. That's the crazy and the number one.com. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform so you get the latest episodes whenever those come out. If you haven't had a chance to, go check it out. The Crazy One is also now on YouTube. I'm doing videos over there about career coaching, tutorials, masterclasses. You can see past keynotes I've done at other events. So head over there. You can watch a bunch of videos, show it some love, hit the subscribe button there too. You can find that as well as just head over to thecrazy1.com/YouTube. And finally, if you got any questions, you just want to keep up with my, I don't know what, the pandemic adventures probably aren't quite as much fun as what they used to be whenever I traveled all the time. But you can follow me on Twitter or Instagram, and you can follow the show on LinkedIn or Facebook. Now today, like I said, I want to talk about your career. Because look, we're at a time when there's a lot of people are changing jobs. There's a lot of people who candidly are losing their job. There's a lot going on. And so as I'm having more of those conversations, as people are coming to me for advice, one of the things that I've started to ask more and more about, and one of the things that I've started to get really concerned about, is as I talk to different creatives and different people, I keep asking them, how many of them have ever negotiated either their salary or any of the terms of their current job? The shocking fact is that the majority, even really senior people in leadership, have not and never actually negotiated any of those things. And I think I want to talk about this today because it's important to understand that negotiating your salary, the terms of your position, even the terms of your potential termination are a perfectly normal part of the process. I'd even go a step further to say that a big part of your success is going to be driven, honestly, in large part by your ability to understand business, to take control of your career, to stand up for yourself, and to put yourselves in positions to be successful in your work and financially. Because I think that's sort of the hidden part, the unspoken part to a big part of my career. Like the work and all that stuff has been great, but in many cases, it was what I did before I even took the job that put me in a position to do that work, that put me in a position to make those changes. And as I said, this has been, for me, it has been a challenge. It's been a learning experience, but it has been that ability to understand that before I accept a role, I really go in there and I negotiate my contract and really look at how do I set the stage for the future success for years to come. So in this episode, I want to discuss what are some of the questions you're going to need to ask whenever you start this process. How do you actually even understand what your value is? Because one of the biggest things that most of us struggle with is we don't have any context. I don't necessarily know what other people are getting paid in my city or in my position. And then the last thing I want to talk about is just should you expect from the negotiating process? What's this going to be like? How do we approach it and think about it? But here's another one of those moments where just in the past where I've talked about being laid off or things like that, this isn't going to be one of those moments where I pretend like this was something that I've always known about, that I was always really good at it, because I wasn't. The reality is I learned about it almost completely by mistake. Or actually maybe not even by mistake, it was maybe a little bit more by arrogance. And I say arrogance because I think honestly it's probably true, because whenever I learned I could negotiate or that I could do things like this it was actually before I took the job at Starwood. They had approached me. I was still working for McCann in Texas at that time. I'd wanted to come back to New York, and they had approached me a few different times saying, look, we want to get into doing more digital. We want to get into more design. We think you'd be a really great fit. Well, the problem is whenever I had interviewed with them, I loved the brands. I thought they were really interesting, but the setup was just all wrong. It was reporting into project management. It didn't have any real authority. The team was very production-centric. There was no vision to have it go in the right direction. And I thought the work, in large part, reflected that. So they had come to me twice. They tried to hire me twice. And twice I'd said no because it was just wrong. And all I could see was the way they had it set up and assumed that was the only way it could be. Well, the difference in the lesson that I learned was actually thanks to their head of digital, who had a better vision and I think was better at all of this than I was, said, look, can you just come to New York and can we have dinner to just talk about, what do you think it should be? Well, I think I was armed with the arrogance of this was a job. At that point, I didn't think I won it. I felt like I didn't have anything to lose. So what I did was I showed up to that dinner with, I don't know, I still have it somewhere. It's like a 10 or 12 page document that basically was a complete breakdown of everything that I thought was wrong with the structure, with the brands, with the way the team was set up, all the way down to like they weren't using Macs, like all of this stuff that was wrong, and just laid it all out in these sort of what I felt were ridiculous terms to be able to come in and sort of demand and talk about all these things. And so I showed up just happy to have this, honestly, this sort of free trip to New York at that time and to be able to see some friends and do things like that. Went to this dinner, presented the document to him, and then the most insane thing happened. After I was done with that, he looked at me and he said, "This is exactly what we need. This is the vision we have been waiting for. Like, this is what it is we want. Like, great, let's do this." And I was like, "Wait, what?" Like, I just made all these, like, what I felt were like crazy demands and was trying to totally change the structure of the organization, and they were totally fine with it. And I don't know what, I was just speechless. But the thing that I realized is that the reason why that moment is so important is you are never going to have more power in your career in that moment between when a company wants to hire you and when you say yes. The ability, I think, in that place, for that to, like I said, to be able to set the tone and set the direction of your success for years to come happens in that moment. And I think the reason why many people don't negotiate their salary comes back to these long-standing issues we've been talking about on the show for a while. I think there's issues around confidence where many people don't feel like they can or should negotiate, because in many cases, we're just thankful to get an offer. And I think more importantly, we don't see ourselves as an equal in the process. We feel like they have the power, they have the position, they have the thing that we want. And so as a result, in many cases, I think we just wait until we get the job. And then once the company sees our value, then we'll start negotiating, or then we're going to start making changes. But the reality is that means you're waiting for the moment when you have lost all your leverage. And it's an obvious mistake, because that's the thing, is before you get there is that moment whenever you can negotiate your salary, the structure, a lot of those different terms to be able to set yourself up to be successful. Because once you're through the door, they're going to be much less likely to make those changes and engage in those things. But I think there's also in that sort of issues around business acumen where many people just don't understand the process or know, how they should approach getting hired. So they let the company hiring them take the lead. And I think that for me is sort of the core issue that I have here. And one of the biggest things that I've learned in my career is that this is about creating two equal sides at the start of a relationship. Because I think whenever you look down the line, if you don't negotiate your salary, if you don't show up as an equal to the team or to the organization that you're going to be a part of, when we do that, we take on this almost like subservient mindset right from the beginning. And I think it's setting us up to approach this the wrong way. It's not setting up a healthy relationship. And again, we're coming into this almost just like, and I think that's what a lot of people will tell me, right? It's like, well, I'm just thankful that they made me an offer. I'm just thankful that they gave me a job. And it's just sort of like, okay, while I understand that, the reality is like, we need to get over it. Because I think the other thing you need to realize is that, this is a process, and it doesn't mean that they even will negotiate with you. But even the act of that exploration is going to tell you something. Because people will, and companies will negotiate when they care about something. And so this is going to help you understand what is it going to be like to work with this company. If they come to the table and it's just like a best and final offer, take it or leave it, it is what it is, then you're going to probably have a pretty good idea of how they treat their people. If they're going to be able to be engaged in a conversation, if they're going to be willing to be flexible, if they're going to be willing to listen to your side and what it is that you want to bring to the table. And I think the other part of this is to hear that this does not just mean when you are in a leadership position. You are able to do this at any point in your career. Obviously, what you're going to negotiate, what it is you're going to want to change or things like that is going to be very different. But I do think that, again, this is something and a skill you need to learn anywhere in your career, because that's one of the things I see, especially for people who are early on in their career, who are junior in that, where I think it's just we're too accepting of, it's just sort of like, well, somehow we're grateful they gave us a job. on the one hand, look, I get it. People need money. But on the other hand, standing up for yourself and coming into that relationship and establishing your position of power is also an incredibly important thing to be able to be taken seriously. Let's start with what to expect, because I think it's critical to know what this process is going to be like so you can be prepared and keep yourself in that position of power. Now, in many cases, the first thing you're going to want to start to do is to be able to just ask some opening questions. And we're going to get into that in a minute. But the questions are really going to be to let you figure out what is negotiable. What are the things that we can talk about? What are the things that we can discuss? Okay, great. Now that they've gone through and you sort of understand the boundaries of the negotiation, then it really is about building your case. Because it really is about, how do you prove that you're worth investing in? How do you prove the higher salary that you want? The different reporting lines, that, like, whatever that is. And I think the more specific you can be with examples about the value you've given to employers throughout your career, the better that is. Or the more you can base it on what other people in this position are getting paid, or something that is factual. Because I think that what you never want to do in a negotiation is guess or bring emotion into it. Because anytime that you're just going to guess and I figure that out, I'm immediately not taking you seriously. Because in that case, I know that you're just sort of making shit up as you go along, and I'm not going to take you seriously because I feel like you're not taking this seriously. And the other part of it is, again, whenever you bring in emotion. Because I think whenever it suddenly becomes personal, whenever, again, you start to skew and become that, you start to lose a little bit of perspective and you start to lose some of those other things. Whenever I've negotiated even on my house or other things like that, like, you can always tell people make a mistake whenever they start to talk about things emotionally. And like I said, it is personal. It is emotional. Again, this is your life and your work. I'm not minimizing that, but that can't be in the lead, and you have to keep some perspective there. But also expect that, again, a negotiation's a back and forth. This isn't where they just say what you want and you say what you want and then everything magically happens, right? There's going to be some resistance. Because even the most airtight, most bulletproof cases for why you should get a salary increase or, again, do any of those things are going to meet some sort of resistance, some sort of questioning, some sort of, and this is why you need to build that case, why you need to have those facts. So when somebody says why, you know what to be able to do. And I think it also really comes down to, it is a negotiation. And I think I try to go into that and try to balance somewhere between being firm and understanding what my value is, whether it is in the market, whether it's to the organization, whether it's to the work I do. Just, again, I'm clear on and firm on what are those points. But at the same point, I don't want to be so firm that I become inflexible. Because at a certain point, I'm going to ask them to give and I need to give. It's about, how do we meet in the middle? How do we both give something so that we can find a compromise and be able to find something that's going to work for both sides? But so I think that's just sort of what to expect. Now, whenever you go into this sort of thing, and you go through the hiring process, and right, and like, you love them and they love you and they're going to make you an offer, that moment is whenever, for me, I want to start asking questions, because that's when I want to start that process of understanding the negotiation. And I think that's why I said you want to do this to really understand where the boundaries are. But I think also to really start to understand what is driving their side. Is there a salary range? Is there a budget number? Is there a time frame? Like, what are those things that are driving them? And in many cases, especially when it comes to employment, it's a budget number, that there's a salary band we need to stay inside of, that this position had been budgeted at a certain number or whatever it is. But those are sort of like, but that's mostly what I'm doing here, is just trying to be able to find those boundaries and just sort of see where their head's at. Now, the first one that seems like it'd be the most obvious, that a lot of people, I think, don't necessarily think about, is just start by simply saying, can I negotiate this offer? It may seem obvious, but I think all businesses are different. So I want to start off by actually asking that question, because with some of them, they are, and some of them, they're not. I just want to be able to open up that dialogue, and if it's not, say, well, why not? Like, is it that... This is just sort of like a take it or leave it offer that I don't sort of love that approach, or why do you do it that way? And again, that ability to sort of get them talking. I think the other thing, and again, as we talk about employment, is to also ask sort of and understand the whole part of your compensation. And so this is something like, really besides the base pay, what are the other things that are negotiable, because in many cases, a lot of offers have different parts. Things like a base salary, a bonus, there could be stock, there could be other benefits, whether it was medical insurance, support for ongoing education, training, paid leave, vacation time, moving expenses, 401k contributions, any of those sort of things, right? Like there tend to be a lot of moving parts, and in most cases, the one thing that everybody tends to only focus on is the base pay. But again, I've even gone in and looked at what are the terms of if I get laid off, what are the terms of other things like that, that down the road, many, many years later, suddenly paid off because those are things I paid attention to and negotiated. So again, I think, I want a holistic picture of what is it that I can negotiate. And so from there, then I want to be able to understand their thinking. So for me, in many cases, it's going to be able to say, great, how did you come up with those numbers? Because I think by asking that question, here again, I can start to understand their thinking. How do they do their research? Where is this position in the salary band? Or just different things like that to start to understand. Because if they're just sort of sticking their finger in the wind, and again, if they're making it up, then I know that I'm going to be able to have the upper hand, because if I can come in with numbers, I can come in with research, I can come in with things like that, I can probably make a very strong case for where I should be at a higher position with them. And then a lot of it is also, you aren't just negotiating right now, because I think for a lot of people, they're just like, they just want to get through the door. I think it's also very important to start to ask about things like, what's the outlook for raises or promotions? What is the career path? Those sort of things, because I want to know what the future potential is to get a raise, to get a promotion, to be able to keep growing here, that in 18 months or 24 months, I'm not going to get dead-ended by the fact that you sort of got brought in to do this one thing and then they never really thought about where you went from there. So it becomes important to really understand those things. And then the other part of that is that, like, it's great if you have a career path, but then the other part that I really want to understand is, like, what are the metrics? What are the triggers? Like, what are the evaluators that you're going to use to decide if this role or if this person is going to be successful? And for me, that is that really important sort of follow-up question. Because if I end up working for this company, this is the information that's going to help me whenever I come back to the negotiating table to be able to say, you're going to ask me to do this and this, to hit this metric, to perform in this way, to hire this many people, to lay off this many people, like whatever that is. And that then I can use that to help build my case, so that ability to be able to do that, again, I think it becomes very important. And the last thing is, and I think this is for me maybe just a little bit of sort of the business craft of this, is always get it in writing. I think for me, verbal offers are great. They can be the start of a negotiation whenever you're saying I'm at this number and they're saying we're at this number, and you just want to make sure you're both in the same ballpark. But whenever I'm getting down to a real offer or to negotiating something real, I want to see it in writing. Because there can be a lot of details that are in there. There can be a lot of details that are left out. And there can be a lot of those little things. Like I said, I want to see it in black and white, because that's the thing. Like, the verbal negotiation is great and it's a good starting point. But for me, it doesn't mean anything until it's on paper. Because whenever that goes to their legal team or HR or other things like that, things can get put in, taken out, and a lot of different things can change around there. So we've gone through the interview process. You're in that verbal negotiation. Maybe it's a written one. You've asked that sort of opening round of questions, and that's great. But I think in this case, now it comes down to, how do you respond? Is it a good offer? Is it a bad offer? Do you even know? And here's the first thing I'm going to tell you, is never respond whenever you get that offer. They may walk through you on the phone. They may pressure you to try to get a response or to say where your head is at. Never react and respond in that moment. It's always, thanks so much, I really appreciate this. I'm going to need a little bit of time, maybe tonight, maybe I need the weekend, maybe I need a day or two. I'd like to be able to sit down and go through this. I'd like to talk it through with my family, to just be able to sort of see what, where we're at on those things. And then once I've had the chance to be able to do that, I'll get back to you. Now, there's a balance here, because on the one hand, don't make them wait too long, because again, this is a negotiation, so they're going to want a response. But on the other hand, you need to do some work and not look too eager. This may feel like you are going to die. It may feel like, this is the thing I want. This is my dream job. Take a breath. Because you don't want to show a position of weakness. You want to be able to make sure that whenever you come back, because if you respond right away, and again, I've been on the other side of this enough. I've hired enough people that if you respond right away, then I know that I've got you. Because then I know how eager you are. I know I'm going to be able to beat you up on the offer a little bit more. I'm going to be able to push back, because I can tell how much you want it. And so that's the thing, is whenever you play it cool, whenever you aren't sort of showing any emotion, when I'm not sure where you're at, then it's harder for me to know. And then it's a bit more of a discussion because I don't know if you're on the hook. I don't know if this is something you're really in for. And so that's the case, is again, you can still have it break down at the last minute, but by doing that, keeps it open. Now, the first thing you want to do, and I would say, look, you should have done this before you got that offer, is you need to do some research. You need to educate yourself. And whether that's going out to some place like Glassdoor or Payscale or Salary.com, there's a lot of places where you can see the average pay for your position in your city. And I think this arms you with sort of a knowledge and a range, because most of the time what they're going to do is they're going to show you the high, low, and the average. Well, then what I usually do in my head is to overlay my skill set and what it is that I do, where I think, okay, according to everybody that I know in the market, do I feel like my skill set is high, low, or the average, so that I can get a general idea of where do I think I should land? Where should this be? And then that way, whenever that number comes in, I have a way to be able to gauge, is it good or not? Because that's the thing, is it's not just what that company does or just their salary band. They are also competing against the larger world. But I think that's the part of it for me, is also whenever I do that, I will try to set think of it like a budget. Because for me, I want to have a range rather than a single number. Some people get extremely fixated on getting to a very particular salary number. They'll do it once you hire them. They'll do it sort of as you're going through this process. But look, my thing is, whenever I'm even pressed for a salary requirement, I'll often sort of give them a range. Because here again, I want to be able to see, are they going to take the high end of that range? Are they going to take the low end of that range? Are they going to take the middle? Because then again, how they respond to it, knowing where those numbers are, is going to be able to tell me something. But I think having that range helps me negotiate and to find a compromise, because then I know if I'm getting towards the upper side, then that's going to make me really happy. If it's towards the lower end, why is it towards the lower end? What are they doing? What are they not seeing me? What's going on there? But I think that way I'm not getting fixated and just sort of like zeroed in, getting tunnel vision to one particular number. And I think a lot of this, and probably one of the biggest mistakes, is to honestly not sell yourself short. Because here again, and I said this before in the questions, you want to make sure you are looking at what is included in the total compensation package. For example, if you're going to earn, we'll say $100,000 a year, and you get a 20% bonus plus health and dental and other incidental benefits, again, your question really should this kind of think about, okay, you know, this is $120,000 plus some fairly generous benefits. Because that's the thing, is I have the salary amount, I have the bonus, and different companies do it different ways. Some will give you a two-part bonus where one part is based on the company performance, one part is based on your performance. Some just go all salary, no bonus. Some go salary with a little bonus and heavy stock options. It's always going to be different, but I think that's the part where you need to understand the value. Understand, what are those stock options? When do they pay off? When do you own them? How long does it take them to vest? A lot of those sort of things, so that again, you know, they may throw some huge stock number at you. If it's going to take 4 years to vest, depending on if they're limited, like are they options or different things like that. There's a lot of nuance to that for you to understand that it's like, no, every year you're probably not going to be handed over that amount of stock. That you're going to get it in some fractional amount or different. Like I said, there's a lot of nuance here, but I think understanding that becomes really important. And then I think the last part of it really is as you're going into this, really understanding your leverage. Because I think your negotiating power is going to depend on what your current employment situation is. Like, for example, if you're unemployed and applying for work, then again, you're going to probably not want to negotiate quite as much because you don't want to lose the position. If I am employed and I already have a job, and this is something where, again, I feel like, well, maybe I want it or maybe I don't. Well, then I may have a little bit more leverage to take a little bit more risk. If it's a job that I really love and I see a huge amount of potential. So for me, it's really just sort of understanding leverage and risk. So that at a certain point, how much do I want to risk? And then again, how much leverage do I feel like I have to be able to make that change? For example, like with the Starwood example, I had a lot more leverage than I realized. And because I wasn't that interested in the job, I was willing to take a huge amount of risk by just going in there and saying, look, this is what I think it should be. In that particular case, it paid off huge because I was able to make all those changes, set us up for success, and that sent us on down the road. But I think just to be able to think about, like you said, how much of this do you want to sort of posture in position? How much risk do you want to be able to take? And it's just often, like I said, that leverage and risk is going to let you decide how do you want to respond. But here is the number one golden rule. I don't care. Like, this is if you only remember one thing out of the show, remember this, is that I think, right, like, your mentality will keep you in the right frame of mind and in a position of power. And that, the opening questions are going to give you the rules and the boundaries. Your research gives you the reference point to know that what you're going to respond with is a reasonable request based on your value. You took some time. You didn't respond immediately, so you can have a level head whenever you go. And the number one golden rule is you never take the first offer. Never, never. Never, never. And the only way you'd ever do that is if it's a best and final offer where they come in and they say, look, this is it, take it or leave it. Then there's no negotiation. You're going to have to be able to do that. But this is my thing, is that the other side, a company, never wants to pay more than they have to. They are trying to get you at the lowest price they can. So they're going to start below the number they want to end up at. And then the place where they think you might take the offer. And that's what, I said, I've been on the other side and I've done this. And I know that if my budget is for $100,000 for this position, then I'm coming in at 85 or 90. Because I'm going to see if you're going to bite at that, do you push back? And I think that that's that sort of thing where, whenever I do that, and then at the end of the day, I sort of know what's going to happen because I'm going to come back at 90. You're going to come back at 100. I'm going to hem and haw. Maybe I'll come back at 95. Then, again, if you're going to play hardball, I'm going to move it to 100, and you're going to feel like you really won because you got me up $10,000. Well, the reality is at the end of the day, you landed at the number that I knew that I wanted to have all along. I just made you feel like you're the one who won, but we actually ended up exactly where I wanted to. So again, understand that that's the game we're playing here. They're never going to come in at where they ultimately want to be. They're always going to come in a little bit below that so you can do this dance. So they're going to give a little. And so again, if you want to be, they're going to come in at 90, you're going to come in at 110, and then you compromise at 100. Both sides feel like they won. But again, at the end of the day, we're going to land on that number where I wanted to be all along. But that's the thing, is that so many people are just like, they just take whatever the first offer is, and it's like, yeah, that's great, I'm going to take it. It's like, okay, you left money on the table. There is no easier way to say that whenever you do this, you leave thousands of dollars a year out of your bank account that you could have had. And that is one of the easiest ways to think about it, is this is why you negotiate. This is why you go into this amount of detail. Also because, like I said, for me, it is also very important that they know who they are dealing with. That whenever we come through the door, that I take this stuff seriously. This is indicative of how I operate. And then again, I'm not just sort of making it up as I go along. And it's work. This is why many of us went to art school or did things that did not involve negotiation or business or things like that. But you need to learn. And look, I think there's other things that I could go into. There's more techniques I can include. But I think this is one of those cases where instead of sort of taking some of those resources and packaging them up here, there is one that I just think is so far and away the best at this, and I think is honestly one of the best investments you can make in your career, that I just want to send you there. And I'll put a link in the show notes to it. But what I would advise you highly to do is to go out and to go to masterclass.com. I think I'm obsessed with it. I continue to watch, again, whether it's about cooking, creativity, business, like there's a lot that are there. But there's one in particular that I think a lot of people didn't pay attention to, and you can buy it as an individual class, or if you buy the whole pass, do that too. But it's from a guy named Chris Voss, and it's called The Art of Negotiation. The reason why I think this is so good is Chris is the former FBI lead hostage negotiator who will go through and teach you how to negotiate. And he advises a lot of CEOs, he advises a lot of business people about communication skills, about strategies, of things you can do every day. There are techniques that he will teach you about mirroring, labeling, bargaining, body language. And it's a lot of it is really comes down to, and I love the way he describes it, as trust-based influence. I think these are skills you can use in negotiating your way into a company. I think that these are skills that will make you better in how you actually show up to work every day, and a lot of those other things like that. And so for me, I think his way of teaching it, the example, it is far more thorough, and it is a far better thing than I think anything that I could put in here. So like I said, I would highly recommend go over to masterclass.com, look at Chris Voss's class on the art of negotiation, because I think that's really the masterclass beyond these basics that I think it is a well worth it investment, especially at a time whenever for a lot of us, we're just looking for something new to do because I don't know if you're like me, but I feel like any day I may hit the end of Netflix or the internet or something because of the amount of programming that I've watched. But again, it's well worth the investment. But I think a lot of this is, and that's why I said, I think it really, this whole conversation to me, like I said, just, it exposes a weakness in too many of us, where we don't see ourselves as equals to the organizations we're a part of. We don't see ourselves as being worthy of sort of working for them or being a part of them. And too often, I mean, look, it is, you need to be grateful. You need to be humble. I'm not saying that. But it can't come whenever you compromise your future financially and from what you're doing with your work. You need to be able to take an active role and take control of your career. And look, and for a lot of companies, I know they don't like when people do this. This has historically been some of the things I've struggled with. They get uncomfortable when you have your own brand, whenever you speak out, whenever you have a podcast, or whenever you have a voice that is outside of theirs. It takes a very special company and a very special set of leadership to be okay with that. Because in many cases, they're sort of like, well, wait, what do you mean? Like, you have some amount of power in this equation too, and we're not sure we like that. In a time when we are so in this crisis of trust, in a time whenever so many people, because of COVID, are seeing that maybe they have more managers than leaders, and maybe this isn't the company they thought they were, whenever so many people have been reminded how quickly you can be viewed as a resource and not as a person. To be furloughed, to be laid off, the decisions are made to protect the well-being of the company at the cost of the people who work for it. This is the reality of business. And so the more that we can show up, the more that you can think about that day that you do get furloughed or laid off. What do those terms look like? And again, most people can't even tell me what the terms are if they get laid off. Do you get a week for every year you were there? Do you get a month? What do they do with your COBRA? What do they do with your health insurance? People are just sort of like, well, I don't know. I guess I'll find out whenever they tell me. That to me is just the absolute definition of insanity. That you're willing to put that much of your life at risk, that you're willing to be that cavalier and not understand just to be able to kind of like move on to the next thing. Because in many cases, we seem to be more eager to leave the situation we're in than guarantee the success of the situation we're about to be in. That for us, we want to be able to go in and quit and be able to get rid of the problems that we have. And that's great. You still are going to get that moment. But your ability, like I said, to understand that one of the most powerful moments in your career is in that moment between whenever they decide that they want you and you say yes, to make the absolute most that you can out of that. To go in, understand what you're signing up for, to negotiate for what that is, cut the best deal you can, and to lay the foundation for your future. Because again, do not wait until after that's over, when you've lost all your leverage, when you're in there and you're just subject to whatever is going to happen. These are the ways, as creatives, we have got to evolve. We have got to get better about this stuff. We've got to just, because these are the things our peers do. These are the things for the people in the other teams that we like and respect and want to know how they get promoted. This is what they're doing that we're not. So again, I think this is one of those things that I want you to be able to think about, to be able to come back, bookmark, reference this episode, start to practice doing these things so that, again, whenever that time comes, this isn't going to feel like an alien thing, or that, again, it becomes super obvious real quick that you're sort of going through the motions. But again, I can tell you don't really know what you're doing. You don't have that confidence. So that's why I said, I don't want to see you get taken advantage of. I want you to put the biggest dent in the universe you can. So, as always, like I said, I'm going to put a link to Chris Voss's masterclass, and you can find the show notes and everything else. Just head over to thecrazyone.com. I'll have a link to the latest episode on the homepage, or if you're catching up with this episode a little bit later on down the road, you can always just go up to that top navigation, hit episodes, all episodes, and scroll down until you find 105 and go into that show page. Like I said, do me the favor of going and hitting subscribe on your favorite podcast episode. And also, you all have been slacking. Do me a big favor. A lot of you listen to this show. The only payment that I've ever asked for, ever, has been, do me a favor of actually leaving a review for the show. You can just go in, hit the stars if you're on iTunes, write a couple words if you really like the show. If you don't, I highly encourage people to tell me why you don't like the show. Write it on a $100 bill. Let me know. I'll give you my address. I joke. But I think, look, that's the thing, is just do me a favor, because it helps the show and helps more people find out about this information. You can follow me on social media. You can get new content, ask me questions. You can follow the show on LinkedIn or Facebook. Remember, head over to the YouTube channel. Check that out. Everybody down in legal wants me to remind you the views here are just my own. They don't represent any of my current or former employers. These are just all my own thoughts, and finally, I say it every time because I mean it every time, especially after 105 episodes. I know that time is truly the only real luxury any of us have. I'm always incredibly humbled you want to spend any of it with me. So go out there, negotiate, kick ass, stand up for yourself, understand your value, take control of your career, and as always, stay crazy.